Captain G1 stood at the observation deck of the monitoring station, staring at the distant star system that had puzzled the galaxy for centuries. Earth, the home of humanity. The species that chose silence over civilization. 340 years had passed since that strange day when Ambassador Yunwu arrived at the Galactic Council with an unusual request. G1 had studied the historical records countless times. The ambassador had been polite, clear, and firm. Humanity wanted complete isolation. No trade, no visitors, no communication. They would seal their solar system and withdraw from galactic affairs. The council had laughed at first. Species didn't isolate themselves. It went against every principle of survival and progress. But Hyunwoo had insisted, and eventually the council agreed. They thought humanity would come crawling back within a decade, begging to rejoin civilization. That never happened. Now Ji-won's job was simple. Watch the Sol system, record any changes, report anything unusual. For the past 20 years of her career, she had recorded nothing. The barrier around Earth's system remained impenetrable to sensors. No ships entered. No ships left. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the universe. "Captain, you have a visitor," her communications officer announced. Ji-won turned to see diplomat Taemin entering the observation deck. The Valorian was tall and elegant, with silver skin that reflected the starlight. He had requested this visit weeks ago, claiming he wanted to see the tomb of the extinct species with his own eyes. "Captain Ji-won," Taemin greeted her with a slight bow. "Thank you for allowing me aboard your station." "It's an honor, diplomat," Ji-won replied. "Though I must correct you, we have no evidence that humanity is extinct." Taemin smiled, a gesture that looked strange on his alien features. "No evidence of life either. 3 centuries of silence. What else could it mean?" Before Ji-won could answer, another figure entered the observation deck. Scientist Dayun was a Kulith, with multiple arms and large intelligent eyes. She had been studying humanity's disappearance for decades, and Ji-won respected her work immensely. "It means they chose silence," Dayun said firmly. "There's a difference between extinction and isolation." Taemin turned to face her. "Ah, Scientist Dayun, I've read your papers. Fascinating theories, though I find them hard to believe." Dayun approached the observation window, her 4 arms gesturing toward the distant Sol system. The energy signatures coming from that system have been increasing exponentially for the past century. Whatever humanity is doing in there, they're using more power than any civilization in the galaxy. "Perhaps their sun is going supernova," Taemin suggested with a dismissive wave. "The sun is stable," Dayun countered. "I've analyzed every spectrum reading we can get through the barrier. The energy isn't coming from the star. It's coming from the planets, the moons, the asteroid belt. Everywhere." Ji-won had heard this argument before. Dayun had presented her findings to the council multiple times, and each time they had dismissed her concerns. The general belief was simple. Humanity had either died out or had regressed to a primitive state. Either way, they were no longer relevant to galactic affairs. "What do you think they're doing in there?" Ji-won asked quietly. Dayun's large eyes fixed on the captain. "I think they're building something. Something big," Taemin laughed. "Building what? A fortress? A weapon? If they wanted to build, they should have stayed in contact with the galaxy. They could have learned from us, traded with us. Instead, they locked themselves away like frightened children. Or like students who needed to study without distraction." Dayun said softly. The 3 of them stood in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Ji-won wondered what life was like on Earth now. Did they still have cities? Did they still look human? Had they changed so much that they wouldn't recognize themselves? "The council is making a mistake," Dayun finally said. "We should be preparing for when they emerge. We should be ready to communicate, to understand what they've become." "If they emerge," Taemin corrected. "Most species believe the humans are gone. The council has more important matters to deal with. The Krzeth Dominion is expanding. 7 species have been conquered in the last decade. That's where our attention should be focused, not on a ghost story." Dayun turned away from the window, frustration evident in her posture. The Krzeth expansion is exactly why we should care about humanity. If they are building something, if they have advanced beyond our understanding, they could be valuable allies. "Or dangerous enemies," Taemin said coldly. Ji-won watched the distant star, wondering which of them was right. In her heart, she believed Dayun. Something was happening in the Sol system. something the galaxy wasn't prepared for. She had spent 2 decades watching that barrier, and she had developed an instinct about it. Humanity wasn't extinct. They were waiting. The question was, waiting for what? As if in answer to her unspoken question, the monitoring station's alarm suddenly blared. G1 rushed to the nearest console, her heart racing. The screen showed something impossible. "Captain," her communications officer called out, voice trembling. "We're detecting massive energy fluctuations in the Sol system. The readings are off the scale." Dayun joined G1 at the console, her multiple arms moving quickly across the controls. "This is it," she whispered. "Something's happening." But as quickly as the readings had spiked, they returned to normal. The barrier remained in place. The system fell silent again. Ji-won stared at the data, her mind racing. That had been a message. She was sure of it. A reminder that humanity was still there, still watching, still capable of making their presence known when they chose to. Taemin stood behind them, his expression no longer quite so confident. What was that? "A warning," Dawon said quietly. "Or perhaps an invitation. Either way, I think we're about to find out what humanity has been doing for the past 340 years. Ji-won nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the screen. The age of silence was ending. She could feel it, and she wondered if the galaxy was ready for what came next. The Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species shouted at each other, their voices creating a cacophony that echoed off the crystal walls. At the center of the controversy was a simple declaration from the Krzeth Dominion. They were claiming the Sol system as conquered territory. Young pilot Hajun sat in the visitors' gallery, his hands clenched into fists. He was Valorian, barely past his species' age of maturity, and he had traveled across the galaxy to beg the Council for help. Not for humanity, whom he had never met, but for his own people and the 16 other species the Krzeth had already crushed under their military might. Admiral Bong-su of the Krzeth Dominion stood at the central podium, his scaled form imposing and confident. His voice boomed across the chamber. The Sol system has been abandoned for over 3 centuries. Under galactic law, unclaimed territory is open for colonization. The Dominion will take possession of this system within the month. "You're not colonizing," Hajun shouted from the gallery, unable to contain himself any longer. "You're invading, just like you invaded my homeworld. Just like you've invaded 17 other systems." Security guards moved toward Hajun, but Bong-su raised a clawed hand. "Let the child speak." His anger is understandable, though misplaced. "The Krzeth Dominion brings order to chaos. We bring structure to the weak. If his people had been stronger, they would not have fallen." Hajun wanted to jump down from the gallery and attack the admiral with his bare hands. His family was dead because of the Krzeth. His entire world was now under their brutal rule. And the Council did nothing. They talked and debated and passed resolutions, but they never acted. The Council Chancellor, a being of pure energy named Bitna, spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The matter of the Sol system is complicated. If humanity still exists within the barrier, this would be an act of war." "If they exist," Bong-su said with a laugh, "show me one piece of evidence that they survive. One transmission. One ship, one sign of life. You cannot. Because they are gone. The system is empty and the Dominion will make use of it." In the back of the chamber, scientist Daun stood to speak. "I have presented evidence multiple times that humanity is active within their system. The energy readings alone suggest a thriving civilization." "Energy readings prove nothing," Bong-su countered. "Perhaps their sun is dying. Perhaps their machines are breaking down. Your evidence is speculation, nothing more." The debate continued for hours, but Hajun could see how it would end. The Council would vote to allow the Krzeth to enter the Sol system. They would justify it with legal language and careful wording. And humanity, if they still existed, would face the same fate as his people. He left the chamber before the final vote, unable to watch the Council's cowardice any longer. Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, a young woman named Yuna sat in a small room filled with monitoring equipment. She was human, though no one in the galaxy knew she existed. Her job was simple: watch the galactic communications networks and report anything important to her superiors. For months she had been tracking the Krzeth expansion with growing concern. She had watched as they conquered system after system, enslaving populations and stripping planets of resources. And now they were coming home. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls, intercepting the encrypted military communications from the Krzeth fleet. 10,000 warships, the largest invasion force the galaxy had seen in centuries, and they were all heading toward Earth. Yuna opened a secure channel that only existed within the Sol system's barrier. "Command, this is Monitor Station 7. We have a situation." The response came immediately. "We know, we've been watching." "They're coming," Yuna said unnecessarily. "Yes, the Council voted 30 minutes ago. The Krzeth have permission to enter our system." Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. "What are our orders?" There was a long pause. Then, "We speak." Two simple words, but they carried the weight of 3.5 centuries of silence. Humanity had remained quiet for so long that the galaxy had forgotten them. Now they would remember. "Understood," Yuna said quietly. The Krzeth fleet entered the Sol system 3 days later. Admiral Bongsu stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the planet Earth on the view screen. It looked peaceful, blue and green and beautiful, no orbital defenses, no warning signals, no resistance at all. "This will be the easiest conquest in Dominion history," his first officer said with satisfaction. Bongsu nodded, but something felt wrong. The system was too quiet. The barrier had fallen away as soon as they entered, as if it had never existed. Sensors showed planets, moons, and an asteroid belt, all exactly where the old star charts said they would be. But there were no cities, no ships, no signs of civilization at all. "Scan the third planet," Bongsu ordered. "I want to know if anything lives there." The science officer worked his controls, then looked up in confusion. "Sir, the scans are being blocked. Something is interfering with our sensors." "Then we go closer," Bongsu decided. All ships advanced toward the third planet. "Prepare weapons." The massive fleet moved forward, 10,000 warships in perfect formation. They had traveled halfway through the system when the first transmission came. It arrived on every channel simultaneously. Impossible to block or ignore. One word in a clear human voice: "Acknowledged." Bongsu felt his scales prickle. "Respond to that transmission. Demand they surrender the system immediately." The communications officer sent the message, but there was no reply, just silence. Back at the monitoring station, Captain Ji-Wan watched the events unfold with growing dread. The Krzeth fleet had entered human space, and humanity had responded with a single word. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy was about to change forever. Hajun stood beside her, having rushed to the station as soon as he heard the fleet had entered Sol system. "They're going to die," he whispered. "Just like my people." Ji-Wan wanted to offer comfort, but she couldn't. She had spent decades watching humanity's barrier, wondering what lay beyond it. Now they would all find out. Daeun checked her instruments for the 100th time. "Something's wrong," she muttered. "The energy readings in the system are spiking again, but I can't locate the source." "What does that mean?" Hajun asked. Daeun looked at him with her large, intelligent eyes. "It means humanity isn't hiding anymore." 48 hours had passed since the Krzeth fleet entered the Sol system, and nothing had happened. Admiral Bongsu was growing impatient. His ships had moved within striking distance of Earth, their weapons charged and ready, but still there was no response from the humans. "Perhaps they truly are extinct," his first officer suggested. "That single transmission could have been an automated system." Bongsu wasn't convinced. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, an ancient instinct warning him of danger. But where? His sensors showed nothing threatening. The asteroid belt was normal. The planets were quiet. There were no hidden fleets, no orbital weapons, no defenses at all. On the monitoring station, Dr. Xiang-Ho was having a very different experience. The xenobiologist had spent the past 2 days studying the sensor data from Sol system, and what he found made no sense. "Captain Ji-Wan," he called out urgently. "You need to see this." Ji-Wan hurried to his station, followed closely by Hajun and Daeun. They had barely left the monitoring room since the crisis began, surviving on stimulants and worry. "What is it?" Ji-Wan asked. Xiang-Ho pulled up a comparison chart on his screen. "These are the old survey images of Sol System's asteroid belt from 350 years ago. And these are the current images." Ji-Wan stared at the two displays. They looked identical at first glance, but as she studied them more carefully, she noticed subtle differences. The positions were slightly off. The shapes weren't quite right. The asteroids have moved, she said slowly. No, Seong-ho corrected, his voice shaking. The asteroids have been replaced. Every single one of them. These aren't natural formations anymore. Da-Yun's multiple arms flew across her own console, running calculations. That's impossible. There are millions of asteroids in that belt. To replace all of them would require resources beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen. Look at the composition readings, Seong-ho insisted. They're metallic, artificial, and they're all giving off faint power signatures. Commander In-soo, the station's tactical officer, joined them. His job was to assess military threats, and every instinct he had was screaming danger. Are you telling me that the entire asteroid belt is some kind of weapon system? I don't know what it is, Seong-ho admitted. But it's been there the whole time, camouflaged to look like natural asteroids. Humanity has been sitting behind a defensive line that we couldn't even detect. Ji-won felt her blood run cold. How much power would it take to hide millions of artificial structures for centuries? How advanced would a species need to be to build something on that scale without anyone noticing? Communications specialist Woo Jin suddenly stood up from his station. Captain, we're receiving another transmission from Sol system. Every head turned toward him. The entire monitoring station fell silent. Play it, Ji-won ordered. A human voice, calm and clear, spoke 3 words. Leave. Final warning. Bong-soo heard the same transmission on his flagship. He laughed, though the sound was forced. They dare threaten the Dominion? All ships target the 3rd planet. Prepare to fire. His weapons officer hesitated. Sir, are you certain? If there are civilians, fire, Bong-soo commanded. 10,000 warships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams and missiles streaked toward Earth, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. For a moment, it seemed as if humanity's long silence would end in extinction. Then the asteroid belt moved. Not some of it, all of it. Millions of structures that had been pretending to be rocks, suddenly activated. They didn't fire back at the Krzeth fleet. They didn't need to. The artificial asteroids transformed. Armor plating shifted aside to reveal ships. Not small fighters or patrol craft, but massive vessels, each one larger than Bong-soo's flagship. And there were thousands of them. Tens of thousands. The human ships moved with impossible speed, positioning themselves between the Krzeth weapons fire and Earth. Energy shields flickered into existence, so powerful they were visible to the naked eye. Every single missile and energy beam hit those shields and simply stopped. Not reflected, not absorbed, just stopped, as if they had hit an invisible wall stronger than any material in the known universe. On the monitoring station, In-soo was frantically trying to understand what he was seeing. Those ships are breaking every law of physics I know. They're accelerating faster than should be possible. The energy output from their shields alone is equivalent to a small star. How many ships are there? Ji-won asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. At least 10,000, In-soo replied, exactly matching the Krzeth fleet number. And Captain, I don't think we've seen all of them yet. He was right. More ships were emerging from the moons of Jupiter, from the clouds of Saturn, from the surface of Mars itself. Humanity had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, and no one had noticed. Da-Yun was weeping, though she didn't seem to realize it. 340 years, she whispered. They spent 340 years building this. While we fought our petty wars and political games, they were advancing beyond anything we could imagine. Young Ha-jun watched the display with wide eyes. Why aren't they attacking? They could destroy the Krzeth fleet easily. It was a good question. The human ships had positioned themselves defensively, but they hadn't fired a single shot. They simply waited, a wall of unstoppable force protecting their homeworld. Then one human ship moved forward. It was smaller than the others, sleek and elegant. It approached the Krzeth flagship directly, stopping just a few kilometers away. Bong-soo stared at it on his view screen. Weapons target that ship. Fire everything we have. The flagship's weapons unleashed hell. Point-blank range, maximum power, enough energy to vaporize a city. The human ship didn't even bother with shields. The weapons fire simply passed through it as if it wasn't really there. Dimensional phasing, In-soo breathed. They've learned to shift between dimensions. That ship is occupying the same space as our universe, but not quite. The energy passes through because it's not really there. The human ship continued forward, phasing back into normal space directly in front of Bong-soo's view screen. Through the transparent hull, he could see inside the vessel. There were no crew, just machines, beautiful and terrifying in their complexity. A swarm of microscopic drones emerged from the human ship, billions of them, each one invisible to the naked eye. They flew toward the Krzeth flagship and began to work. "Sir, they're taking us apart," the engineering officer reported in panic. "Dismantling the ship at the molecular level. Weapons offline. Shields offline. Life support is failing." All around the fleet, the same thing was happening. Human ships weren't destroying the Krzeth vessels. They were carefully, methodically taking them apart piece by piece, separating weapon systems, disabling engines, leaving the crews alive but completely helpless. Within 6 hours, the entire Krzeth invasion force was floating dead in space. Not a single Krzeth soldier had been killed, but 10,000 warships were now nothing more than scrap metal. A final transmission came from Earth. This time it was a woman's voice, strong and clear. "We did not seek isolation to hide. We sought it to grow beyond your wars. Consider this a lesson in restraint. We could have destroyed you. We chose not to. When humanity speaks again, we hope you will have learned to listen." Then, as quickly as they had appeared, the human ships vanished. Stealth systems engaged. They faded from sensors and sight. The asteroid belt looked like nothing but rocks again. The solar system appeared empty and peaceful. Only the remains of the Krzeth fleet proved that anything had happened at all. The recording had been playing on repeat across every news network in the galaxy for 3 days. 6 hours of footage showing the most powerful military fleet ever assembled, being dismantled like toys in the hands of a child. Everyone was watching. Everyone was talking. And everyone was afraid. Fleet Admiral Su Jin sat in her office deep beneath Earth's surface, reviewing the same footage with a critical eye. She had commanded the defensive Sol system for the past 20 years, and this had been her first real test. In her opinion, her people had been too gentle, but that had been the point. "Admiral, the Council is requesting another meeting," her aide informed her. Su Jin sighed. The Galactic Council had been requesting meetings constantly since the incident. They wanted to talk, to negotiate, to understand, but humanity wasn't ready for that conversation yet. The demonstration had been carefully planned to send a specific message. "We are powerful, but we are not aggressors." "Tell them we'll respond when we're ready," Su Jin replied. On the monitoring station, researcher Mi Kyung was documenting everything. Her job was to record first contact situations for the historical archive, and this was certainly that. She had compiled thousands of hours of footage, sensor readings, and analysis. Future generations would study this moment for centuries. Captain Ji-won found her in the archives room, surrounded by holographic displays. "Have you found anything new?" she asked. Mi Kyung gestured to one of the displays. "I've been analyzing the movement patterns of the human ships. Watch this." The display showed a sequence of maneuvers performed by a group of human vessels. They moved in perfect synchronization, weaving through space in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. "Now watch this," Mi Kyung continued, pulling up another sequence. "This is from a different group of ships on the opposite side of the solar system. The pattern was identical. Perfect coordination across millions of kilometers. They're networked," Ji-won realized. "Their ships are all connected somehow." "More than that," Mi Kyung said excitedly. "I think the pilots are networked too. Or maybe there are no pilots at all. Maybe the ships are being controlled by a single intelligence." The implications were staggering. If humanity had developed true artificial intelligence, or if they had learned to link their minds together, it would explain their perfect coordination. It would also mean they had solved one of the great challenges that had eluded every other species in the galaxy. A young refugee child named Jun Seo wandered into the archives room. He was one of dozens of children from conquered worlds who had been given shelter on the monitoring station. Hajun had taken it upon himself to care for them, and they often explored the station together. "What are you watching?" Jun Seo asked, staring at the displays with wide eyes. "History," Ji-won told him gently. "The moment everything changed." Jun Seo watched the human ships dance through space. "Why didn't they shoot back?" he asked simply. It was the question everyone was asking. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming technological superiority, but they had used it to disable rather than destroy. In a galaxy used to conquest and warfare, the restraint was more frightening than violence would have been. "Because they wanted to teach us something," Mi Kyung answered. "They wanted to show us that power doesn't have to mean destruction." "My parents used to say that," Jun Seo said quietly. "Before the Krzeth came, Jiwan knelt down to the child's level. Your parents were wise, and maybe now the galaxy will learn the same lesson. In the Galactic Council chamber, Chancellor Bitna was struggling to maintain order. The emergency session had been going on for 12 hours, and tempers were running hot. Humanity must be controlled, Ambassador Kyung-soo of the Venturi Collective insisted. They have technology that could destroy us all. We cannot allow them to operate freely. And how do you propose we control them? Dae-yoon asked with barely concealed contempt. Did you not watch the same footage as everyone else? They dismantled the Krizeth fleet without breaking a sweat. What makes you think we could stop them if they decided to attack? Which is exactly why we should strike first, Kyung-soo argued. While we still can. With what? Commander In-soo interjected. He had been invited to present his tactical analysis to the Council. I've spent 3 days studying their capabilities. The technology gap between us and humanity is larger than the gap between us and primitive Stone Age tribes. We have nothing that could threaten them. The chamber fell silent. It was one thing to suspect humanity had advanced beyond them. It was another to hear a military expert confirm it so bluntly. Bitna's energy form pulsed with distress. Then what do you recommend, Commander? In-soo looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of species. I recommend we listen. They gave us a message. They could have destroyed the Krizeth fleet. They could have destroyed our monitoring station. They could probably destroy every military installation in the galaxy if they wanted to. But they didn't. They showed restraint. The question is, will we? Before anyone could respond, every light in the chamber flickered. Then, without permission or warning, a holographic figure appeared in the center of the room. It looked human, but perfect. Too perfect. Its features were a blend of every ethnicity. Its gender ambiguous, its age impossible to determine. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere. We are humanity, it said simply. Every guard in the chamber drew their weapons, but Bitna held up a hand. How did you get past our security? Your security exists in physical space, the figure replied. We are broadcasting from Earth. This is merely a hologram, but your systems cannot block it because we built the protocols your systems run on. 300 years ago, we shared our technology with the galaxy. You built your current civilization on our foundations. We could have stopped you from using it, but we didn't. That was our gift. Ambassador Kyung-soo found his voice. What do you want? The figure turned to face him. We want nothing from you. We are here to tell you what we expect. We have watched your wars. We have seen your conquests. We have observed your cruelty. For 340 years we watched and we hoped you would grow beyond it. Some species have, others have not. You have no right to judge us, Kyung-soo protested. We are not judging, the figure said calmly. We are observing. But we will not allow the galaxy to destroy itself. We will not allow species like the Krizeth to continue their campaigns of conquest. We will not stand by while the strong prey on the weak. So you'll become our masters? Bitna asked. Rule over us? No. The figure said, and for the first time something like emotion entered its voice. We are not your enemies. We are not your rulers. We are your children, grown and left home. You gave us life, in a way. You showed us the stars. Now we have grown beyond you, but we have not forgotten where we came from. The hologram began to fade. When you are ready to grow as well, we will speak again. Until then, we watch, we hope, we wait. Then it was gone, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Hajun sat in the visitors' gallery, tears streaming down his face. For years he had prayed for someone to stop the Krizeth. He had begged the council for help only to be ignored. And now humanity had done what the council could not. They had ended the threat without firing a shot. But more than that, they had given him something he thought he'd lost forever. They had given him hope. Hope that the galaxy could be better. Hope that power could be used to protect instead of conquer. Hope that his children, if he ever had any, might grow up in a universe where strength meant compassion rather than cruelty. On Earth, Admiral Sujin watched the council's reaction to their message. Do you think they understand? Her aide asked. Some of them do, Sujin replied. The others will learn. Or they won't. Either way, the age of conquest is over. We'll make sure of that. 1 week after humanity's demonstration, the galaxy was still reeling. The Krizeth Dominion had withdrawn to their homeworlds, their military shattered and their reputation destroyed. Other aggressive species had quietly canceled their expansion plans. And the Galactic Council was facing its greatest crisis in recorded history. Chancellor Bitna floated at the center of the emergency session, her energy form flickering with stress. She had led the council for 30 years, navigating countless diplomatic crises, but nothing had prepared her for this. "We must make a decision," she announced to the assembled representatives. "Humanity has demonstrated capabilities beyond our understanding. We cannot ignore them any longer. The question is, how do we respond?" Ambassador Kyung-soo of the Venturi Collective was the first to speak. His people were traders and merchants spread across thousands of systems. The idea of a species with overwhelming power made them deeply nervous. "We must form a defensive alliance, pool our resources, develop countermeasures to their technology." "Countermeasures?" Dayun laughed bitterly. "Did you not hear Commander Insu's report? We are centuries behind them, maybe millennia. Any attempt to match their technology would be futile." "Then what do you propose?" Kyung-soo demanded. "That we simply surrender? Allow them to dictate terms to the entire galaxy?" "They haven't dictated anything," Daun pointed out. "They defended their home, disabled an invasion force, and returned to silence. If they wanted to conquer us, they could have done it already." The debate had been going in circles for days. Some representatives wanted to appease humanity, offering gifts and treaties. Others wanted to unite against them. A few suggested simply pretending nothing had happened and hoping the humans would return to their isolation. Ha-jun listened from the gallery, frustrated by the council's inability to act. His people had suffered under Krzeth rule while the council debated. Now, when humanity had shown them a better way, the council was still paralyzed by fear and pride. In a research facility on the planet Kulith Prime, scientist Daun was working late into the night. She had been given access to all the sensor data from Sol system, and she was determined to understand how humanity had advanced so far so quickly. Her analysis painted a fascinating picture. For 340 years, humanity had pursued pure scientific progress without distraction. No wars to fight, no political conflicts to navigate, no resources wasted on military expansion. They had turned their entire civilization into a research project, and the results spoke for themselves. They had solved energy production. The readings showed fusion reactors far more efficient than anything the galaxy used. They had mastered materials science, creating substances that shouldn't be possible according to known physics. They had cracked artificial intelligence, dimensional manipulation, and possibly even faster than light communication. But the most fascinating discovery was what Daun found in the old records. 341 years ago, just before isolation, humanity had experienced a near-extinction event, a nuclear war that had nearly destroyed their planet. Ambassador Hyunwoo's request for isolation had come just after that war ended. The pieces fell into place. Humanity hadn't isolated themselves out of fear or arrogance. They had isolated themselves to heal, to learn, to ensure they would never again come so close to self-destruction. And in doing so, they had grown beyond the cycle of violence that trapped the rest of the galaxy. Dayun's research was interrupted by a message from her assistant. "Doctor, we have an unauthorized visitor at the facility." She frowned. The facility was supposed to be secure. "Who?" "He says he's a human." "Name, Professor Dong-hyun. He claims he left Earth before the isolation." Dayun's heart beat faster. She had read about Dong-hyun in the historical records. He had been one of Earth's leading scientists, but he had opposed the isolation plan and left the solar system in protest. That had been over 300 years ago. He should be long dead, unless humanity had solved that problem too. Professor Dong-hyun looked young, perhaps 40 in human years, but his eyes held the weight of centuries. He sat across from Daun in her office, sipping tea with the appreciation of someone who hadn't tasted it in a very long time. "I saw the footage," he said quietly. "I saw what my people have become." "You don't approve?" Daeun asked carefully. Dong-hyun was quiet for a long moment. "I spent 3 centuries arguing against isolation. I believed humanity needed to engage with the galaxy, to learn from other species, to be part of the cosmic community. I thought isolation would make us weak and afraid." "You were wrong," Daeun observed. "I was wrong," Dong-hyun agreed. "But I wasn't entirely wrong. Isolation made us strong, yes. Incredibly strong. But it also made us different, alien even to ourselves. The humans back on Earth, they're not like me anymore. They've changed in ways I barely understand." The hologram that appeared to the council, Daun prompted. "That wasn't a single person, was it?" Donghyun smiled sadly. No, that was what they call the consensus. Millions of humans, their minds linked together through technology I helped invent ironically. They think as one when they choose to. Act as one. Feel as one. It makes them incredibly efficient, but... He trailed off. But it scares you, Do-eun finished. It fascinates me, Donghyun corrected. And yes, it scares me. What does it mean to be human when you can share thoughts with millions of others? When you can process information faster than any individual mind? When you can live for centuries, maybe forever? Daeun leaned forward. Why are you telling me this? Because the galaxy needs to understand, Donghyun said seriously. Humanity isn't going to conquer you. They're not interested in empire or control, but they're also not going to let you continue destroying each other. They see themselves as guardians now, older siblings watching over younger ones. Some species will resent that, Daeun pointed out. Some species will die if they don't accept it, Donghyun replied bluntly. The Krzeth would have continued their expansion if humanity hadn't stopped them. How many more civilizations would have fallen? How many billions would have died? Humanity did what the Council couldn't. They enforced peace. Daeun considered this. What about freedom? Self-determination? Don't species have the right to make their own choices, even bad ones? Do children have the right to play with fire? Donghyun countered. At what point does freedom become suicide? These are questions humanity debated for centuries during their isolation. They don't have perfect answers, but they've decided that some lines cannot be crossed. Genocide, slavery, extinction-level warfare, these things will not be tolerated. Who gave them the right to decide? Daeun challenged. Donghyun set down his teacup and looked at her with ancient eyes. Power gave them the right. That's how it always works. The strong make the rules. The difference is, humanity has chosen to use their power to protect rather than dominate. That's more than most species have ever done. Back in the council chamber, Chancellor Bitna was calling for a vote. All those in favor of opening formal diplomatic channels with humanity. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only a handful of species abstained, too proud or too frightened to reach out to the newcomers who were actually ancient. The motion passes, Bitna announced. We will send a delegation to Sol System with a formal request for dialogue. In the gallery, Hajun allowed himself to hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something better. Maybe the galaxy could learn from humanity's example. Maybe his children would grow up in a universe where strength meant protection instead of conquest. On Earth, Admiral Sujin received the Council's request with satisfaction. They had waited for this, had planned for this. Humanity had spent 340 years preparing not just weapons and technology, but also philosophy and purpose. They knew what they wanted to say to the galaxy. The question had always been, would the galaxy be ready to listen? Prepare a response, Sujin ordered. Tell them we accept. The age of silence was ending. The age of conversation was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. 3 months had passed since the Council's vote to open diplomatic channels with humanity, but Sol System remained silent. The formal request had been sent and acknowledged, but no invitation had been extended. No ambassadors had arrived. No further communication had been made. It was as if humanity had said their piece and returned to watching from the shadows. This silence frustrated many species, but it terrified others. If humanity could disable the Krzeth fleet so easily, what else could they do? And if they were watching the galaxy, what were they seeing? Agent Haya Jin of the Kulith Intelligence Service had a simple mission. Get inside Sol System and gather information. Her superiors wanted to know the truth about humanity's capabilities. Were they truly as advanced as they appeared, or had the demonstration been an elaborate bluff? Hee-Jin was one of the best infiltrators in the galaxy. She had successfully breached secure facilities on dozens of worlds. She specialized in going where she wasn't supposed to be and finding out what people didn't want known. Her team consisted of 5 specialists, each chosen for their unique skills. They had spent months building a stealth ship using technology reverse-engineered from ancient human designs. If anyone could sneak past humanity's defenses, it was them. The ship crossed into Sol System without incident. No alarms, no challenges, no response at all. It was almost too easy. Sensors are showing normal readings, her pilot reported. The asteroid belt looks like rocks. No sign of the ships we saw in the footage. Hye-Jin studied the displays carefully. Something felt wrong. Go deeper. Get us closer to Mars. They traveled for 6 hours, penetrating further into the system than any non-human ship had gone in centuries. Still nothing. No defenses. No warnings. No humanity. This doesn't make sense, He-Jin muttered. Where are they? The answer came suddenly. One moment their ship was alone in space. The next it was surrounded by hundreds of human vessels, appearing from nowhere like ghosts materializing from fog. How did they? Her pilot started to say, but the words died in his throat. Every system on their ship shut down simultaneously. Life support remained active, but engines, weapons, communications, everything went dark. They were floating helpless like a leaf caught in a current. A single message appeared on their view screen. Curiosity is healthy. Aggression is not. Learn the difference. Then, without any sensation of movement, their ship was suddenly outside Sol system. 3 weeks later, they arrived back at Kulith Prime, escorted by automated drones that vanished once they reached home space. He-Jin's report to her superiors was brief. We cannot spy on them. They allowed us in to teach us a lesson. Mission failed. But not everyone was interested in spying. Professor Dong-Hyun had finally been granted permission to return to Earth after 3 centuries in exile. The journey through Sol system was surreal. He could see the changes everywhere. Mars was green now, with oceans and forests. Venus had been completely terraformed. Even Mercury had structures on its surface, massive solar collectors feeding unimaginable amounts of energy into the system. The Earth that greeted him was both familiar and alien. The cities were there, but they had grown upward and downward, creating layers of civilization that extended miles into the sky and deep into the ground. The oceans were cleaner than he remembered. The air was pure. There were more forests than when he had left, not fewer. He was met by a welcoming committee of humans who looked perfectly normal, until he tried to shake hands with one and realized she was a hologram. Or rather, she was both real and not real. Her consciousness distributed across multiple bodies and virtual spaces simultaneously. Professor Dong-Hyun, she greeted him warmly. I am Sun-Hee. Welcome home. You're part of the consensus, he observed. Sun-Hee smiled. Sometimes. When I choose to be, that's the key word, choice. We can link our minds when we want to, but we remain individuals when we prefer. It's the best of both worlds. She led him through the city explaining the changes. Humanity had achieved post-scarcity. Energy was unlimited. Resources were abundant. Disease had been eliminated. Aging was optional. Death itself was more of a choice than an inevitability. It sounds like paradise, Dong-Hyun said carefully. It is, Sun-Hee agreed. For most of us. But not everyone is happy about it. She took him to a district he didn't recognize where the buildings were older, more traditional. Here lived the humans who rejected the new technologies, who chose to remain entirely biological, entirely individual. They think we've lost our humanity, Sun-Hee explained. That by linking our minds and extending our lives, we've become something else. Something less. Have you? Dong-Hyun asked. Sun-Hee considered the question seriously. I don't think so. We still feel love, fear, joy, sadness. We still create art and music. We still argue and disagree. We're just more than we were. Is that wrong? Before Dong-Hyun could answer, alarms sounded throughout the district. Sun-Hee's expression changed, becoming distant as she accessed information through the consensus. We have a situation, she said urgently. Some members of the resistance are broadcasting our technology to the galaxy. They believe we should share everything immediately, rather than waiting for other species to be ready. Can you stop them? Dong-Hyun asked. We already have, Sun-Hee replied. But the damage is done. Some of the information got through. The galaxy now has access to our fusion reactor designs, our genetic therapy techniques, and our AI protocols. Dong-Hyun felt a chill. Those technologies in the wrong hands could be catastrophic. What will you do? What we always do, Sun-Hee said calmly. Watch, hope, and intervene if necessary. In the Galactic Council chamber, the leaked information had caused chaos. Every species was scrambling to acquire the human technologies. Some wanted to use them for good. Others saw opportunities for profit or power. Chancellor Bitna tried to maintain order, but it was impossible. We must regulate this technology, she insisted. Without proper understanding, it could be dangerous. Who are you to regulate human technology? Ambassador Kyung-Soo demanded. If humanity wanted to control it, they shouldn't have let it leak. Daun stood to speak and the chamber quieted. She had become humanity's unofficial advocate among the council, though she had never met a human in person. "You're all missing the point," she said firmly. "This wasn't an accident. Humanity allowed some of their people to leak this information. It was a test. They want to see what we'll do with it. Will we use it wisely? Will we cooperate and share? Or will we fight over it like children fighting over toys?" Her words hung in the air. Everyone knew she was right. Humanity was still watching, still judging, still waiting to see if the galaxy could grow beyond its violent past. Hajun had been working with refugee communities, helping them rebuild their lives after Krizeth occupation. He received the leaked technologies with hope. Here were tools to help his people. Clean energy to power their settlements, medical treatments to heal the wounded, AI assistance to help with education. But he also saw the darker possibilities. The same fusion technology that could power cities could create weapons. The genetic therapies could cure disease or create biological weapons. The AI could assist or control. "What do we do?" his assistant asked him. Hajun thought about the young refugee Jun Seo, who asked why humanity hadn't shot back at the Kurzeth. He thought about the lesson in restraint that humanity had taught, and he made his decision. "We use them for good," he said simply. "We prove to humanity that we can be trusted, that we can learn, that we can grow beyond our past." It was what all of them had to do now. Every species, every government, every individual. They all had to prove they were worthy of the gifts humanity offered. The question was, would they succeed? Or would they fail and force humanity to intervene once again? Only time would tell. 1 year after the demonstration, the galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The Krizeth Dominion had collapsed from within, their conquered worlds declaring independence and their military scattered. Other aggressive species had quietly abandoned their expansion plans. Trade was flourishing. Wars were becoming rare. But the most significant change was in attitude. Species that had fought for millennia were now talking. Cooperation was replacing competition. The leaked human technologies had forced everyone to work together, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that would have been unthinkable before. Captain Ji-Wan stood at her usual place on the monitoring station, watching Sol System as she had for 21 years. She was preparing to retire soon. Her replacement had already been chosen, a young officer eager to take on the responsibility. But Ji-Wan wanted to stay until the end of this story, however it concluded. "Captain," her sensor operator called out, "we're detecting a ship leaving Sol System." Ji-Wan's heart raced. This was it. After a year of silence, humanity was making a move. The ship was small, elegant, and broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple. "We request permission to dock at Galactic Council Station Omega 7. We wish to speak." Within hours, every major news network in the galaxy was covering the story. The first human ship to leave Sol System in 341 years. The first official diplomatic contact since Ambassador Hyunwoo had requested isolation so long ago. Chancellor Bitna convened an emergency session of the council, and for once every representative attended in person. The chamber was packed. No one wanted to miss this moment. Hajun sat in the visitors' gallery, his hands trembling with anticipation. Beside him sat young Jun Seo, now a student at the council's academy. The boy who had once asked why humanity didn't shoot back was about to see his question answered in person. The human ship docked without incident. Security scans showed it was unarmed, containing only 3 passengers. When the airlock opened, the galaxy held its breath. Ambassador Unji stepped into the council chamber and she looked perfectly human. No obvious cybernetic enhancements, no alien modifications. She could have walked through any pre-isolation human settlement without drawing a second glance. But the sensors told a different story. Her body was integrated with technology so advanced it was barely detectable, woven into her cells at the molecular level. Behind her walked 2 others, a young man who introduced himself as Jae-sung, a cultural liaison, and an elderly woman named Elder Min Seo, who would speak for humanity's consensus. The 3 humans walked to the center of the chamber and stood calmly, seemingly unbothered by the hundreds of eyes watching them. Chancellor Bitna spoke first, her energy form pulsing with carefully controlled emotion. "Ambassador Eunji, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I welcome you. We have waited a long time for this moment." Eunji bowed respectfully. Chancellor, council members, people of the galaxy, we thank you for your patience. We know our silence has been difficult for many of you to understand. Today we hope to explain. Elder Minseo stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber without amplification, as if she was speaking directly into everyone's mind. 341 years ago, humanity almost destroyed itself. We had discovered nuclear weapons without discovering wisdom. We had reached for the stars while still thinking like territorial animals. We were children playing with fire, and we nearly burned our home to ash. The chamber was silent, listening intently. Ambassador Hyunwoo came to this council after our last war ended. He requested isolation not out of fear or arrogance, but out of necessity. We needed to learn who we were before we could walk among you as equals. We needed to grow up. Minseo paused, letting her words sink in. For 340 years we watched you. We saw your wars, your conquests, your suffering, and we saw our younger selves reflected in your actions. We understood because we had been exactly where you are now. Ambassador Kyungsoo couldn't contain himself. Then why didn't you help us sooner? Why did you let species like the Krzeth rampage across the galaxy? Yoonji answered calmly. Would you have listened? If we had emerged 2 centuries ago and told you to stop fighting, would you have obeyed? Or would you have seen us as another threat to be conquered or contained? The question hung in the air. Everyone knew the answer. We had to wait, Minseo continued, until the galaxy was ready to hear what we had to say. The demonstration against the Krzeth was not an act of aggression. It was an act of teaching. We showed you what power looks like when wielded with restraint, when used to protect rather than conquer. Daun stood from her seat, her multiple arms gesturing respectfully. What do you want from us now? Yoonji smiled. We want to speak now, but not as members of your council, not as rulers or masters, as partners, as teachers and students. Because while we have advanced technologically, you have things to teach us as well. Your diversity, your cultures, your unique perspectives, these are valuable beyond measure. Jae-sung stepped forward, holding a small data core. We offer our knowledge freely. This contains cures for 17 incurable diseases, clean energy technology that can power entire civilizations without harming planets, and agricultural advances that can end hunger across the galaxy. He placed the core on the central podium. This is a gift, proof of our sincerity, the first of many. But, Minseo said firmly, we ask something in return. End your wars, not for us, not because we demand it, but for yourselves. Prove that you can share the stars with each other before we share everything we've learned. Ambassador Kyungsoo objected. You're setting conditions? You speak of partnership, but you're dictating terms. We're setting goals, Yoonji corrected gently. We're not asking for instant perfection. We understand that peace takes time. We struggled for centuries to achieve it ourselves. But we need to see effort. We need to see species choosing cooperation over conflict, dialogue over violence. Hajun stood in the gallery, unable to contain himself. What about the species that refuse? The ones that want to continue conquering? Yoonji looked up at him, and her eyes held both kindness and steel. We will not allow genocide. We will not allow slavery. We will not allow extinction-level warfare. Some lines cannot be crossed, but short of those absolutes, we believe in self-determination. Species must choose their own path. We will not force peace upon you, but we will not stand aside while the strong prey on the weak. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives embraced humanity's offer immediately. Others had reservations. A few remained hostile, seeing humanity's power as a threat to their sovereignty. Finally, Chancellor Bitna called for a vote. All those in favor of accepting humanity's partnership and committing to peaceful conflict resolution? The vote was not unanimous, but it passed by a wide margin. 17 species abstained. 3 voted against, but the rest voted yes, choosing hope over fear, cooperation over isolation. Minseo's holographic form shimmered, and suddenly the entire consensus seemed present. Millions of human minds speaking as one through her voice. Thank you, they said together. When we were young, we screamed into the void, desperate to be heard. We sent messages into space, hoping someone would answer. We built weapons, fearing what we might find in the darkness. We have learned that wisdom speaks softly, and strength lies in choosing not to fight. The consensus faded, leaving only Minseo standing in the chamber. We are humanity. We were quiet, not because we feared you, but because we needed to learn who we were before we could walk among the stars as equals. Thank you for learning to listen. Hajun found himself standing and others joined him. Soon the entire council chamber was on its feet, not in fear or submission, but in recognition of a moment that would define the galaxy's future. Young Junseo tugged at Hajun's sleeve. "What happens now?" he asked. Hajun smiled, tears running down his face. "Now we grow up, just like they did, together." 20 years later, Captain Ji-won retired to a small colony world on the edge of the galaxy. She spent her days teaching history to young students from a dozen different species. Her favorite lesson was about the day humanity emerged from isolation and taught the galaxy that true power came from restraint, true wisdom from patience, and true strength from choosing to protect rather than destroy. On Earth, the barrier that had surrounded Sol system for centuries was gone. Human ships traveled freely throughout the galaxy, working alongside alien vessels to explore new worlds and solve ancient problems. Joint research stations orbited distant stars. Mixed colonies thrived on planets that had once been battlegrounds. But humanity maintained one rule, taught to every species that sought their most advanced knowledge. Some lessons must be learned independently. Technology could be shared, but wisdom had to be earned. It was the same lesson they had learned during their long isolation, and now they passed it on. Ji-won would often sit on her porch in the evening, watching the stars and remembering her years watching Sol system. Sometimes human ships would pass overhead and she would smile. Humanity had been quiet for centuries. Then they spoke once, and in speaking, they had changed the galaxy forever, not through conquest or force, but through example.